The World of Warcraft trading card game is a collectible card game based on the World of Warcraft MMO. It was first made and published by Upper Deck Entertainment in 2006. 4 years later, Upper Deck lost the license from Blizzard and it was passed off to Cryptozoic Entertainment. The game had a soft relaunch with slightly updated visuals. Cryptozoic would continue to develop and publish the game until 2013, when Blizzard Entertainment announced that the TCG would be discontinued and they would not be renewing the game's license. The following year, Blizzard released Hearthstone, an online card game with many of the same characters, abilities, and artwork. In this video, we will be covering some advanced topics in the WoW TCG. If you have not already, it is strongly recommended to view the basics video before this one, as we will be building on concepts explained there. As previously mentioned, the WoW TCG went through 2 different publishers. When Cryptozoic took over the game from Upper Deck, the game received a slight refresh on the wordage of some rules and the templating of cards. It is because of this that you may notice a visual difference in the card frames between these versions. Despite this, both the Upper Deck and Cryptozoic era cards are fully compatible with one another. The rules presented in this and the basics video are from the most recent modern version of the rule set. A comprehensive version of the rule set can be found in the description of this video. Location cards represent zones in Azeroth and beyond that your party goes to get buffs. They can be identified by the green border. A location is placed the same way that a quest card is, during the place a resource action face up. Because locations usually have powerful effects, each player may only have one location card face up in play at a time. If you play a location face up while having one already in play, you must choose one to flip face down. Some location cards have a value in the bottom right corner. Locations that have this number will have an effect in their power that adds counters on the card. The value in the bottom right is the maximum capacity of those counters. A location with its maximum amount of counters on it cannot have any more counters added to it. Location cards themselves are still considered resources and can be exhausted as such. Remember that each player may only control one location at a time, and that if they have a counter capacity in the bottom right corner, you cannot add more counters to the card than its capacity. Master Heroes are powerful, high-resource costing cards that replace your starting hero. They begin in your deck like any other non-hero card and are played like an ally, ability, or equipment, through its cost in the top left corner. Any damage, attachments, or equipment that were on your previous hero get moved to the new hero. You can play multiple Master Heroes over the course of a game. In each instance, replace your current hero and move over all damage, attachments, and equipment to the new one. Certain cards in the WoW TCG have a golden scratch-off portion that reveals a code which can be used to redeem in-game items in the World of Warcraft MMO. Once a code is used, it cannot be redeemed again. These cards are referred to as loot cards, because they provide in-game loot. Some of these loot cards and their corresponding in-game items are incredibly sought after, and sell for high value. Loot cards typically exist with and without code versions. Both are fully compatible with one another and both can be included in decks following typical deck building rules. Regular decks are required to have at least 60 cards, not counting your hero card, and must contain no more than 4 copies of any card. When building a deck, you usually begin with the hero card, as your hero will dictate the kinds of cards that you can put in your deck. With some exceptions, all hero cards are a part of a faction and have a class. The 2 main factions are Alliance and Horde. A hero card specific faction is visible by the banner in the top left corner. There are 10 different classes that a hero card can be, and each has their strengths and weaknesses. For example, priests may have access to a lot of healing while not having many strong armor cards. You can only include cards in your deck that match your hero's specific class and faction. Again, these are found in the top right corner of cards. Neutral cards, meaning cards that are not part of any specific faction and/or class, can be included in decks with hero cards of any faction or class. Occasionally, hero cards will include deck building information on the cards themselves. For these, refer to the text when deck building. While you can only have up to 4 copies of the same card in a deck, certain cards with the unlimited tag to the right of the type line break this rule. You can put as many of these as you wish in a deck. Cards themselves may have deck building information in their powers as well, such as requiring a specific type of hero with an attribute, such as a profession. These kinds of cards can only be put in decks with heroes that have this required attribute. Others have requirements that are specialization based. Cryptozoic era cards have cards with the talent keyword described like on this Mind Melt card. The text reads Shadow Talent. You can't put Discipline Talents or Holy Talents in your deck. This means that if you decide to put this card in your deck, you can only include other cards with the Shadow Talent keyword in as well, and cannot include Priest cards that have the Discipline or Holy Talent keyword in their power. Whenever Upper Deck era cards have an X hero required keyword in their power, and the X refers to a talent specialization, that keyword is treated as if it was an X talent, disallowing the inclusion of other specializations talents in the same deck. For example, Blessing of Kings reads Protection Hero Required. However, you treat this as if the card reads Protection Talent, you can't put Holy or Retribution talents in your deck. Upper Deck era heroes had specializations as one of their attributes in the type line, but Cryptozoic era cards do not. This errata was done to make the older cards more compatible with the newer ones. It's important to note that this errata does not apply in the same way to profession requirement cards. Those will still require a hero with a specific profession in order to be included in the deck. Beyond these general rules, the rest of deck building is up to the strategy that you wish to employ. Remember that because every card can be used as a resource if necessary, you do not need to have a particularly high amount of resource-strict cards like quests and locations. The general rule of thumb is 10 to 16 quest cards to non-quest cards in a 60-card deck. Depending on what type of format you and your opponent are playing, there will be additional deck building rules, such as what sets of cards that you can include. We will be describing some common formats at the end of this video. As mentioned before, players may play instant cards and use powers during an opponent's turn. But there are often times when you want to do something after your opponent plays a card but before that card affects the game. The chain allows you to do so. Most actions you take in this game don't happen right away. First, they put a card or effect on the chain where it waits to resolve. Only when that card or effect resolves does something happen. The chain keeps track of the order in which things happen in the game. Cards and effects resolve off of the chain in reverse order. This means that if you put something on the chain after your opponent does, your card or effect will have an impact on the game first. If the chain is empty and two players want to do something at the same time, the person whose turn it is gets to act first. If the chain has a card or effect on it and two players want to do something at the same time, the player who added the last thing to the chain gets to act first, then the person to the player's left, and so on. This is commonly known as having and passing priority. Whenever a card or effect goes on the chain, players get a chance to respond to it with payment powers or instants of their own. If no one wants to respond, the card or effect resolves and has its impact on the game right away. If someone does respond, the chain determines the order in which things happen. The player who put the last card or effect on the chain gets to respond first with as many actions as they want. Once that player is done, the other player gets a chance to respond. When there are no more responses to the last card or effect on the chain, it resolves and has its impact on the game. Then, the next to last card or effect on the chain moves up and is ready to resolve. Players can respond to it with the same process, and so on for the entire chain. Once the chain is empty, if no one adds to it, the game moves on. This may seem complicated, but during gameplay, all you need to remember to do is offer your opponent chances to respond to any cards that you play, or whenever you move between phases of a turn, and they must do the same to you. It's common courtesy and known as giving the opportunity for a response. Here is an example. It's the action phase of your turn. You play Shield Bash, an ability that reads your hero deals 1 damage to target ally. The ally you target has 3 health and 2 damage counters on it already, so the 1 damage your hero will deal as the ability resolves will be enough to destroy the ally. Your ability card goes on the chain and you tell your opponent that you're done adding to the chain for now, offering any responses. Your opponent responds by targeting the same ally with Primal Mending, an instant ability that reads your hero heals 2 damage from target ally. That ability goes on the chain on top of yours, and then your opponent gives you the chance to respond. You choose not to respond, so the last thing added to the chain, your opponent's healing ability, resolves first, removing the 2 damage counters. You both get another chance to respond to your first ability, but neither one of you chooses to respond. Your ability resolves and your hero deals 1 damage to the ally. When everything is done resolving, the ally has 1 damage counter on it. When a card or effect resolves, it does what its text says it does, or as much as it can, and then leaves the chain. The only exception is when that card or effect has 1 or more targets and none of those targets is legal when it tries to resolve. When that happens, the card or effect is interrupted. A card or effect that's interrupted is simply stopped, with no other impact on the game. An interrupted card is put into its owner's graveyard. For example, if you played this Annihilate card, which reads destroy target exhausted ally or exhausted equipment on an opposing ally, your opponent has a few options to interrupt the effects of the card. They can play a card that interrupts the card itself, like Sacred Shield, in which case the effect of Annihilate does not happen and it goes to its owner's graveyard. Or they can make the target of Annihilate an illegal target, with a card like Arcane Warding. Arcane Warding makes the target untargetable, and since it would resolve before Annihilate, Annihilate has no legal targets and becomes interrupted, going to the graveyard also. During gameplay, all of these concepts can be expedited by simply asking any response after playing a card. Your opponent can then play a card or use a power or simply say no, and then gameplay proceeds as normal. It's important to keep in mind that any cards you play can be responded to, and if so, will have their effects happen afterwards. Pay attention to the ready resources of your opponent because they might be saving them for an instant card that interrupts a card that you play or prevents an effect that you wish to happen. However, you and your opponent can use this to your advantage, and bluff a response by leaving resources ready. While most gameplay formats in the WoW TCG are one-on-one, there are some cooperative encounters that players and groups can take on with raid or dungeon decks. These encounters have heroes teaming up against a common powerful foe or group of foes themed after scenarios in the MMO. There are 11 printed raids and dungeons, and each has different playstyles, from having a player control the bosses as a one versus all scenario, to the bosses being automatically piloted on their own, allowing everyone to team up together against the deck. For the players playing against the raid, it is usually favorable to build the decks with this cooperative play in mind. Strategies that mirror the MMO can be effective, such as having dedicated players be healers, tanks, and damage dealers. Each raid and dungeon has their own set of rules of how to play and run them, so refer to their rulebooks for more information. Even though the game was initially created as primarily a one-on-one game, this raid and dungeon format of play is very popular, and to some, the main selling point of the WoW TCG. While between one another, players may agree to play as they wish, at tournaments there are generally a handful of formats that are used which have their own set of rules for deck building. There are two main categories for formats, constructed and limited. Constructed means your deck is constructed following a set of rules for that tournament beforehand. Limited means that you construct your deck during the event, usually through opening booster packs and crafting the deck from your opened pool of cards. There are many different types of limited formats, so refer to your tournament organizer for rule and deck building specifics. For constructed formats, there are a handful of common ones that are used, such as Classic. In Classic, players may use cards from all released sets and non-sets, meaning special releases like starter packs. Another common format is Core, where players may use only cards from the last two blocks of sets to build their decks. Contemporary is another popular format that only allows cards from the World Breaker set and onwards, thus only using cards from the Cryptozoic era of the game. All of these formats typically have a list of banned cards that cannot be included in your deck. As with all specifics, refer to your tournament organizer for details. The Cryptozoic tournament and game policies can be found in the description, if you wish to model your own tournament after them. Dual Wield. While typically you will only strike with one weapon during combat, as you can usually only wield a single weapon at a time, some abilities and cards grant the hero dual wield, allowing the character to equip multiple weapons. Regular dual wield allows the equipping of a second one-handed melee weapon, but there are variants of this keyword like range dual wield and two-handed dual wield. When dual wielding weapons during combat, you can strike with both simultaneously, adding each of their attack values to yours. As an important note, if you happen to be wielding a ranged and melee weapon at the same time, you may only strike with one of them during a combat, and cannot do a melee and ranged attack simultaneously. Token. Some cards may ask you to put a token into play. The text will always describe what the type of token is and its attack and health values, if any. You can use a printed card with the token's information on it from out of game as representation for the token. Otherwise, it's common to use dice or face-down cards as representation. A token cannot be in a hand, graveyard, or deck. If for whatever reason a token leaves play, such as from taking fatal damage or being returned to hand through a power, the token is removed from the game. Sabotage. This keyword will always be followed with a type of card or game zone, like hand or graveyard. The text following the keyword will describe what happens when an unprotected attack is successful. A character with Sabotage can attack whatever is immediately followed by the Sabotage keyword, meaning they can propose the type of card or game zone as the defender. When in a sabotage combat, the defending player may protect their cards and zones as if they were allies. If they do, the combat stops being a sabotage and turns into a regular combat, with both the attacker and defenders dealing damage to each other as normal. Thrown. This keyword will usually be found on weapon cards. When striking with a weapon with thrown, your hero is granted the long range keyword temporarily. An attacker with long range does not take any damage in return during the damage step of combat. Then, at the end of the player's turn, the card with thrown gets returned to its owner's hand, as if the weapon was thrown and has now returned to the player. Stash. Cards with stash have an additional effect that happens if you place the card as a resource face down. Cards with stash are identified by both the keyword and the text box being split. Whenever placing a card with stash as a resource, do the effect described after the stash keyword in the second half of the text box flipped up, and then put the card face down into your resource row. Smash. When cards with the smash keyword deal damage to an ally, any excess damage beyond what is fatal is dealt to the defending hero. For example, Roar Tramplehoof is attacking Kara Vestal. After all the regular steps of combat, during the damage step, because Roar only needs to deal 2 damage to destroy Kara, the excess 5 damage is dealt to the defending hero. Alternatively, if Kara already has 1 damage on her, Roar would deal 6 damage to the defending hero, as he only needs 1 damage to destroy Kara. Time is money. Cards with the time is money keyword may use their exhaust powers the same turn that they enter play. Normally, an ally must prepare for a turn to both attack and use exhaust powers. But with the time is money keyword, they may use powers that require an exhaust as part of their cost right away. It's important to note that unless they also have ferocity, allies with the time is money keyword must still wait a turn before being able to attack. This concludes the Advanced Topics video. You should now have a pretty good idea about how to play the game. Linked in the description are resources that should answer any further questions that you may have. Thanks for watching.